Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome back to Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Live. In today's session, we'll be focusing on rethinking supply chain resilience. The crisis has underlined how vulnerable the supply chain is to shocks, and is leading some manufacturers to reconsider their inventory and planning strategies to better mitigate disruption and instability. The question we'll ask in this question, does this mean a rethink in lean and just in time, and of course the strategies around that, and of course looking more in depth into the technologies that can enable supply chain resilience, and of course that rethink in the supply chain. So I'm delighted to be joined by a great panel of experts who'll be talking about this subject. Michel Morvan, who is co-founder and executive chairman for Cosmo Tech. Amlan Bose, who's COO and senior vice president for Smart Links Technology, and is the former vice president for supply chain from Ford. Also joined by Wim Blomme, the head of automotive solutions and supply chain at DP World. Thank you all, gentlemen, for joining this session. Looking forward to an engaging discussion. To kick off the session, I'd like to invite Michel to give us some thoughts in terms of what the main areas focus are for you in relation to supply chain resilience.
Thank you very much, Neemish. Yeah, so at Cosmo Tech, what we are doing, we are a software vendor, and we're creating software to help decision makers make informed and best decision. And the situation that we see in the domain of supply chain and the question of resilience is extremely important today. And what we observe, in particular with what happened in the last months, is that resilience is extremely important. Everybody is looking for resilience because of what happened. But at the same time, it's not so easy because everybody at the same time is looking for cost reduction, once again, because of what happened. And all that in a changing world where uncertainty became the norm. So it seems, to our customers, what we see is that it seems kind of impossible to solve. And the only way to be able to address the question of resilience, of robustness, of measuring and anticipating the impacts of the decisions which are made, daily decisions, is to increase visibility. So what a customer needs, and if you want a resilient supply chain, you need to increase your visibility. And this goes in a couple of directions. The first one is you have to be able to forecast, but you have to be able to take into account all the cascading effects that come from the complexity of your supply chain. And if I go to this forecast, this need of visibility and of forecast, once again, it seems almost impossible, because what we learned in the past, in the last months, is that we cannot rely only on data from the past, because we see that tomorrow is not going to be like yesterday. And so what we bring here, and that's for us at Cosmo Tech, and for me personally, for me the most important is we need the visibility, and this visibility can be brought by the help of simulation, of being able to simulate, of course, to use data from the past, but to put that in a simulation tool that is going to take into account all the different aspects, the interconnections, the different parts of the supply chain, and being able to do then what if scenarios. Once again, on a day-to-day basis, new thing happen that was not here yesterday. What is the best reaction? What if I do this? What if I do that? Or more than that, I want to obtain this result. I want to be able to send what I'm supposed to send. And this is what we call how-to optimization. And this can be done only with simulation that is going to manage all these cascading effects. That's how we see it at Cosmo Tech.
That's great. Thank you very much. I think it's really interesting, that having the ability to kind of simulate all of these different scenarios, right? I think it's that ability that gives you that visibility, right?
Yes, that's right. And our experience and what we see with the customers is that it seems to be the only way. I mean, people realize now much more than it has been done in the past that tomorrow is not going to be like yesterday. So all the tools, and they are great tools that have been developed based on artificial intelligence that learn from data from the past, and it can, and it's very useful. The problem is it cannot be the only approach for resiliency, just because of this fact that we cannot rely only on the past. And so what do we put in the simulation? What do we put in the knowledge? We have software in which we encapsulate all the expertise of different parts of the supply chain, and we link them together, and we have the ability to run tens of thousands of scenarios testing to see what may happen, and we can put also random, unexpected events and see if we are at risk by doing this or by doing that. And that's why we believe that this approach that we call simulation-based digital twin, we create a digital twin of the supply chain, is, from our perspective, the only way to give this visibility that is not only anchored in the past, but anchored in the understanding of the different experts and putting that together.
Yeah, that's fascinating and really useful, right? Because I think it's also, we always consider resilience based on major events, right? But sometimes it's not the major events, it's the small events that cause the biggest disruption.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I was mentioning cascading effects. Sometimes you have just one supplier that, maybe it can be a tier 2 or tier 3 subcontractor, and it's kind of far away. And then, by cascading effects, what happens there is going to impact everything. And the problem is you have to react fast. You have to, anticipate, to mitigate before having to manage the big mess that is happening. And more today than yesterday because of the cost constraints. Everybody has to cut costs. And the people we talk to, they say, how is it possible? The boss asks us to cut costs on the one hand and to be resilient. And how is it possible? And what we say is, that's right. There are different kind of events that can happen. Some can happen on the supply, on the different suppliers, but the demand can change from one day to another, much more than it was the case in the past. Because if there is a confinement somewhere, because of the virus or anything, then from one day to the other, there is no demand anymore there. And how can you adapt your supply chain? How can you be resilient? And for that, you need tools that will give you this visibility and that will allow you to make informed decisions. To have, of course, I'm not able to predict the future, but with the tools, we are able to.
You just put yourself on mute. Are you back now? Thank you.
Oh yeah. So what I was saying is that this. You have to see, you're not seeing and viewing the future, maybe someday, but not today. However, you can show possible future, you can show trends, you can show risks, and then people can use the great tools that they have with AI and so on and so forth to inform these kind of systems, and that are going to give them information about the possibilities, about the possible future, so that people can make the best decisions.
Yeah, fantastic. That's really interesting. Let me bring in one of the other guests that we have here, Amlan Bose, who's from SmartLink Technology, and of course, former vice president for supply chain at Ford, who's of course done a lot of work in this area as well. So I'm sure Amlan's got many comments to add to this conversation as well.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, good evening, audience and panelists. Answer your question, Neemish, as to what have been our learning. Let me go back to what has been our problem ever since the pandemic started, and I'm talking about Ford Motor Company. First thing we realized that because we have been producing cars for the last 100 years, we know how to run the logistics and supply chain, and we were wrong. We realized that we talk about end-to-end digitization, end-to-end supply chain, and the word end-to-end is very frequently used by us. But we realize that we are not indeed end-to-end. The fact that we don't know what we don't know. For example, we were very proud of our supplier base, and we have hundreds and thousands of supplier base, but we rarely know anything beyond the T1s and the T2s. We have no idea who is a T3, T4, and it actually goes to TX. So we have complete lack of visibility from T1 to TX, at the most the T1s or the T2s. And that, when a global pandemic of this nature started, was one of the biggest block for us. The second point we realized is that as soon as there was a crisis, I think 4 of us were talking to the same supplier, the same Chinese supplier. I mean, someone from North America, someone from Europe, someone from Asia Pacific, someone from South America. So we realized that how decentralized we are. And in a crisis, we need to understand that how having gone centralized before would have helped us. So that kind of was another dimension that we realized that this is an opportunity for us to kind of streamline and all. And it took few weeks for us to centralize the whole thing quickly, and then so that one team sitting, and the Asia Pacific team was chosen, will gather the global status, the supply chain logistics status, the stocks, the availability, the pipeline, the logistics and all that. So it took a few weeks for us to settle down and have one team do it centrally for the entire Ford Motor Company. So in a way, if anything COVID has done is that it has actually expedited the critical need for, accelerated the need for digitization. Now, I am attending quite a few webinars, and in many of the webinars, I have been asked to talk about supply chain resilience. And I have a little bit of worry that I hope people are not misunderstanding, in the sense that the resilience, the more we're talking about it, it doesn't mean that in future we won't have a pandemic. It won't mean that in future, if a pandemic happens, because we're talking so much of resilience, we won't have any loss of production or loss of profitability and all. That is not what possibly resilience is, what we're talking about. What we're talking about is taking the learning from this global pandemic and this global scale disruption, is that for us, resilience is how to build a digitized know-how of our today. The moment I have a digitized know-how, then be it a pandemic, God forbid, tomorrow, I know what I know. I also would know what I don't know. And from there, then you can start taking actions. For example, resilience for us would be, for example, if there is another, God forbid, an issue in, say, city of Wuhan, then my database should be able to cut off all the Wuhan supplier base. It should be able to cut off a portion of the Shanghai port, and it's reduce the Shanghai port's capacity, say, by 50%, as an example. If there is an issue in say, Spain or France, it should be able to cut off that particular territory, and the database should be able to tell me that you won't be able to make such and such vehicle lines, but hold on, you can make the other vehicle lines because they do not pass through these few affected. That instantaneous database should be in front of the entire Ford Motor Company leadership instantaneously. That then gives you the power to decide then where to focus, which production line to focus, which market to focus, which market to shut down, or which plants to shut down and allow them. So resilience is nothing but sitting on a major mountain of data, intelligent, connected, analyzed, and then it is constantly telling you. And that incorporates, as Michel was talking, the past history. It talks about the current situation. It talks about predicting the future. I was in one of the sessions where there was a panelist from Nestle. And Nestle, he was saying that we realized that even though the coffee consumption in the office spaces have gone down, but because of the work from home in last 5-6 months, but coffee consumption at home has gone up. And because you're at home and you're consuming more coffee, you tend to go for the rich brand of coffee. So the orders for the rich brand of Nescafe Gold or something went up. Now this realization might have taken some time for them to realize, but if you build a database resilience model, you should be instantly getting all those things and then take care of the future forecast. So how to build a wonderful network of digitized connectivity encompassing all aspects of our business would be helping us being truly resilient, and should be able to forecast, because this is not the first pandemic, and God forbid this won't be perhaps be the last as well.
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much, Amlan. That's a very interesting story there as well about somebody from outside of the automotive industry, but fascinating to and really interesting to hear about how you can use that data to then adjust the products you're building, where you're building them, how you build them, etc. Right, and based on the data that you have, right? I think that's really interesting, and I think we'll circle back to that comment as well, right? Let me just, I think it was also important here is then how you as or how the industry collaborates with the service providers as well, right? So, maybe we can get some input from Wim as well, who's of course on the service provider part of that, and how they work with you to also build that resilience into the network as well.
Yes, thank you, Neemish, and good day to everybody attending this session. Indeed, as DP World, we are traditionally a port and terminal operator, and what we have seen with the disruption, not only linked to COVID, but also the economic crisis, is that the data that is circulating in the supply chain is very fragmented. And to take our example, we are basically seeing what arrives at the ports and the terminals, what is being shipped out, but we don't have any visibility into the first and the last mile, and also what is happening on the ocean part. And what DP World has done in the last, I would say, 2 years is invest heavily in digitization, and we have built what we call the logistics platform, whereby we are enhancing the visibility throughout the supply chain. And what it basically does is it captures data from our terminal operating systems. It links it into the data of the ocean carriers. It then links it into the land operations, rather than it be road transportation with our own assets, or intermodal with our own assets or infrastructure, or even with third-party carriers. We are actually giving that platform and connecting all the data through terminal operating systems, warehouse management systems, transport management systems, and to a certain extent also the data of customers who are transparent in this exercise. And this is going to offer an end-to-end visibility within the supply chain, which will enable automotive manufacturers, but also the other industries we're serving, to get that ability to quickly adapt their supply chain, and as Amlan was referring to, perhaps change elements on the production side, be more agile with regard to order forecasting, enable the organizations to also not lose market share by not timely arriving with cargo, but also ultimately reducing inventory. So the elements we are focusing upon is ensuring that this digital platform is encapsulating, as Michel was saying, as much data as possible, because only that data will allow to make any predictive analysis or simulations that can be shared with the customers. Because we clearly see that the industry, rather it be automotive or FMCG, like Amlan was referring to with the Nestle case, that it is lacking data from an end-to-end supply chain visibility, and that we can provide this through the logistics platform by connecting it to, again, ocean carriers, third parties, etc. So that's where we see the focus coming in the next, I would say, months. But again, not only linked to automotive, for other industries as well, Neemish.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wim. That's really interesting side of things as well, right? I mean, that ability again to capture the data and analyze that, and of course develop those scenarios is key to all of this, right?
Yes, and what's also happening, and it's particular more to the automotive industry, is that although the sourcing, and I'm sure that Amlan can build on that, the sourcing was very much fragmented with tier one, etc. Because there was not necessarily a desire or a necessity to have end-to-end solutions. Now it is clear as well that sourcing is changing from an automotive perspective, and that we are less looking to sourcing an ocean part, sourcing a land part, sourcing let's say the distribution parts, but that the automotive sector is more looking to an end-to-end solution with one provider, which is also why we are developing the control tower function based on the digital tools that we have, because that allows to engage as a single point of contact with the automotive manufacturers to give them that visibility and enable them to be more agile in adapting their supply chains.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'd like to bring our other panelists back into the conversation, Wim and Michel. Before we kind of get into under the skin of this a little bit more, I'm just going to launch a quick word cloud poll, so we can just kind of gauge and see what the audience thoughts are in regards to what the main challenges are in building resilient supply chain. So let me just kick that off. So that should be live. So we'll see how the results of that come in. Let's go back to the follow up on this conversation about we've talked about control towers, building resilience, the data that's required there as well. So how will all this evolve, right? So how are supply chains evolving and transforming as a result of COVID, but also with the data that's available today? And then how do you go about kind of executing these more advanced supply chains as well? Let me start with you, Michel.
Thank you. Well, it's a great question. I mean, to know how it's currently evolving. What I really enjoy by listening to Amlan and Wim, of course, they have their own perspective. But what I've seen, I mean, by the way, heard, is the importance of network, of connectivity, of not looking at things in silos, but realizing that when Alman explained that it was they had 4 people asking the same thing to the same suppliers, there is a lack of connections, and it can and it's the same with the port, interacting with the different carriers and taking all that into account. And I think this is of course digitization is going to help to take these interconnections into account. And I think this is a big trend, not looking in silos, but looking globally. And the second point that is very important for me is because of the situation, we have, our customers and people managing supply chains have to do, once again, 2 things at the same time. They have to think to design the supply chain so that it takes into account, this interconnection, this complexity. But at the same time, they have to operate it on a day-to-day basis to be able to have very rapid results. And for me, another very important point will be that people agree for doing big things and big changes, but it has to have a part that gives results which are operational, which are now, and not in 3 years. So for me, this is something that is currently, that's the movement is this one. That's what I see.
Yeah, sure. Amlan, of course, managing active supply chains, and obviously, as Michel was saying, they're talking about the kind of incremental changes that you need to make now versus that kind of longer term view, right?
That's right. So as I was referring to that, if COVID has done anything, it has really hastened the need for digitization much faster. So, for example, in the automotive sector, if I can talk about, first of all, there is a focus on centralization. So, if the entire enterprise was running supply chain in 4 different ways, now there is a very clear direction, leadership thoughts in terms of centralizing it in a particular country or a particular location, generally a low-cost country where you can run it, because most of it's the same ERP which runs the overall supply chain, the follow-up, the logistics and everything. So that's something which is a huge leap forward, I feel, and a huge reduction in the structural cost. That's one. The other thing is that the focus on technologies and tools, the optimizers like the TMS, that's something which is happening. Now, of course, while I was in Ford in Asia Pacific, we successfully launched the TMS from the JDA Blue Yonder. And that really helped us to centralize the whole Asia Pacific, South America, and EMEA together And we used to have one single center of excellence in India, Chennai, running the transportation network planning, design, strategy for the entire region, from India and Thailand on one extreme to Brazil and Argentina on the other extreme. So the power of digitization, I think we are realizing, and I'm sure the benefits that we are seeing, we're saving millions of dollars in centralizing and in doing it centrally for the whole region. And the tool itself is giving us that much of saving, which we were missing. So I sometimes feel, on a lighter note, our future generations perhaps will be saying that, what, my grandfather used to actually call up a supplier to check about a part, or actually call up a transporter to check where the part is. Because digitization, a connected digitization, is taking us into a situation where you are really heading towards a touchless supply chain or human touchless logistics, a whole fully connected world. And the faster we accelerate with the implementation of the Industry 4.0 and all its basic tenets, Logistics 4.0, Supply Chain 4.0, we are seeing that you really do not need to put so many people onto the job. The technology will do it for you. So we need to wake up. And I think this pandemic has actually woken us up. And I don't think we have to discover anything or invent anything. It is all there. And we are actually 2-3 years down the line, we should be having the power of quantum computing also ready by that time. So that could only hasten the global computing power. And once you have a center of excellence with a centralized mindset, once you have the entire end-to-end digitized, and then on top of it, if you're putting the power of quantum computing, I think, as I said, it's nothing short of a miracle. It will be a seamless logistics and supply chain. That's how the future I see.
Fantastic. Yeah. Wim, what are your perspectives on this, again, from a service provider perspective?
Yeah, I think what is important for us is that there is indeed this collaboration, as Michel was referring to, interconnectivity, because if part of the supply chain is actually closing itself off and remains in silo working, then the data will not allow to do the simulations, and artificial intelligence will not be able to predict. So I think that's something we need to do. And I think the ocean carriers are now seeing it as well, that they cannot hold this information, and that they need to be able to share that. And if they are not doing it, then other technology is actually enabling us to capture that data as well, because more and more we have satellite tracking devices on loading units that enable us to have that visibility. The second thing is that also from a manufacturing perspective, we think that they need to be more transparent in their supply chain redesign. What is going to happen with nearshoring, offshoring of parts? Is that going to be now less into Asia and closer to the European industry and manufacturing, to take an example, or are they seeing that actually there is a lack of resilience within their supplier base that is preventing them of doing so? So that transparency helps us as well to adapt the needs, the future needs. And I think what's also important is we need to be able to adapt our asset infrastructure, and we are heavily investing as DP World in global solutions, and those are ranging from port solutions into feeder solutions, but also into land and hinterland solutions. And we can only make the right investments to help the industry forward if we know what the future plans are. And our acquisition portfolio is quite impressive over the last couple of years, and we're talking about billions now. But we want to spend the right billions at the right place at the right time, because these billions, obviously, from an investment cycles, are 20-30 years before they are generating a decent return. And I think it's all about more transparency that will generate more visibility. And as Amlan and Michel were referring to, how to overcome future crises linked to pandemics or economical crises. So that's where we are actually listening more to what the market needs, and try to create this openness with the shippers and the beneficial cargo owners on where their future needs, according to them, lie.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and actually, I think in line with what the industry is and the audience is thinking as well, right? So just to pull up the results from the looking at the results from the interactive word cloud that we have there, visibility is by far the the biggest, the one that stands out the most, right? And then closely behind that is data availability, right? So that's I think that's the key, right? Visibility and the data that you need in order to view that, right?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of transparency, interconnectivity, and I think both of that will allow in the future to create that visibility, and not only for the automotive industry, but for all industries. And we also have to cope with a generation who is instantly wanting goods delivered, take the Amazons of these world, etc. And for the car industry, it will be no different. I just ordered a car and I have to wait 8 months. I'm not sure that the future generation is willing to wait 8 months, or will just go for another solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that switch in demand from the customer, has to be addressed at some point, right? And how do we go about that? Let me just I know we've got one more poll. We've kind of reached our time, but let's just run this poll. It's focused on how far are we from creating self-orchestrating supply chains, right? So let's put that to the audience, and then let's also have a quick final discussion around that, because I think that's as you intimated there, Amlan, as well. This is where we might potentially be heading with quantum computing and those technologies, and that's key to this as well, right? The technology is advancing so quickly. The cost of that technology is advancing so quickly. When you're talking about embedding sensors and all of those elements that capture the data, is the cost of that is reducing and rapidly developing.
That's right. Yeah. No, I am reminded of a statement a quote which our ex-CEO, Ford CEO, Alan Mulally used to say quite often. He used to say that the data will set us free. The data will make us all transparent. And that's so right, because once you have the data and you have that data is connected, and hence once connected, it can now tell an intelligent story. Because it can now look its past, its future, its changing trends, and all that which goes with AI and ML, and in future the quantum computing or quantum inspired algorithm will only do things much faster, much faster actually. So with that, if you see what's happening is, what I'm actually telling is, I'm not needed. If the connected data and connected sensors are doing everything, not many of me or my generations are needed to run the business of tomorrow. So we have to be ready for an overall organizational change, mindset change, paradigm change, cultural change, behavioral change. And perhaps you will be faced with resistance at every juncture. So that's another thing. We are also observing there is quite a quick shift in behaviors, even on our day-to-day life. My 80-year-old grandma has started ordering online vegetables, fruits and vegetables, which she has never done. Even I haven't online ordered vegetables, because I always want to go and have a touch and feel of the apple that I'm picking up, but that has changed. We are also seeing the whole concept of micro fulfillment centers coming up. For example, the demand after this pandemic has happened in such a way that it is no more even I'm ordering something in Amazon and giving Amazon 2 or 3 or 4 days that it says it will take. But I now will order, say, 1 kg of sugar or salt, and I want it in 30 minutes. So the whole concept of online ordering and demand and fulfillment is changing. And that's why the whole focus on micro rather than large scale warehouses or large scale distribution centers and all. So now we're talking about micro, how to be within 30-minute distance from the customer. How can I build? So there is a kind of I spoke about centralization in the automotive industry in doing certain things. And also the FMCG industry perhaps will be going through a decentralization, because post-pandemic, they realized that, oh my God, we need to have many more micro warehouses to reach out to the customers, because they want to wait for a coffee for 3 days. If they order online. So that kind of really our world is going topsy-turvy. And the only thing that we can do as people, as professionals in this industry, is do not be a resistance to it. Do not resist the change. And then it'll pick up. The data has the beauty of, you democratize the data, and the data has the beauty of running itself. Stay away from it and don't corrupt it.
Michel, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we are not so far, but there are some points to address. The first one is, I think the techno is here. I mean, the information, the techno is here. I was talking about simulation. We are implementing solutions at scale, at very, very big scale, and the result is fantastic. The question is, how can we do that? How can we create that value? These being accepted by everyone, because these changes have to be accepted. And we have seen some reluctance sometimes. And why I was saying going step by step, because going short term, showing we have a thing we call that 3 months value creation. So we provide the technology, and users can see that it makes their life much easier, that they have much OEE, better results very fast. And this is once you convince people like that you can go further and obtain. I mean, we discussed about the data on the one hand, about the simulation on the other hand, about the interconnections. At the end of the day, the value to create is absolutely fantastic. And being resilient, it's going to bring a fantastic value. The question is, how can you really use the different levers to leverage all this information? How are you going to have a return on data? You invest in data, or you're sure you're going to have get value from that. So what we think is, if we have only one part of the system, we are not going to create all the value. We need data. We need to take into account interconnections. We need to simulate, but we need to do all that together. And our customers, Renault, the car manufacturer, is one of the big customers. It's a partner. And we have explored that with them. They want rapid results. The situation is complicated. But at the end of the day, they want a good return on their data. And a lot of our customers says, well, we have great data, but we only do with them 10% of what we could do. And so this notion of return on data, putting all interconnection, complexity, data, and simulation, it's fantastic. But we have to go step by step, and we're going to provide together a great value to all the manufacturing industry. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Wim, and then we'll show you the results of the poll.
Yeah, I think from perhaps a different perspective, as Michel was referring to, Renault is a partner of DP World as well, through the sponsorship we do with the Formula One this year. And basically what we're looking at is how can we reduce the total cost of ownership at this moment of time by improving let's say the inventory. How can we get that down by all the buffers that has been built in supply chain in order to improve that overall cash position? And that is also based on data, because again, if it is so fragmented from a sourcing but also from an executional perspective, if we can't tie in all the knots together and have that complete visibility, it's very difficult to improve an end-to-end total cost of ownership. And so data is key for the future, but also for now. And it's important to focus on the now as well, because our ability to adapt to that is going to enable the automotive industry to face the reality and to overcome the issues of today. So we think that data is also for this moment of time going to be helping us a lot to create that solution that is actually reducing the cost, and that overall will improve the go-to-market strategy as well of the customers. Because as Amlan was saying, we don't want it tomorrow, we want it now, and that is because we have been spoiled on that, and as consumers are quickly adapting to that new availability and luxury as such.
Yeah, absolutely, and a completely new world, right? I think also this the current situation also driven that change as well, right? Big time. But let me just share with you the results of the poll. So we talked about how far are we from creating self-orchestrating supply chains. Option 1 was 1 to 2 years, and nobody believes that that's going to happen in that time frame. The other option was 3 to 5 years or 10 years. And by far, the audience believes it's going to be within 3 to 5 years, with about 30% of them thinking 10 years. So, I can't tell you when it's going to happen, but the audience says 3 to 5. Maybe you've got I'd like to hear your views on that timescale as well.
You're asking me?
Yeah, Amlan, what's your view on that? How long do you think? How far away are we from this?
One thing I can say for sure, even though most of the audience would have opted for 3 to 5 years, what I can tell you, everyone must be feeling the pinch of saying, shit, is it going to take still 3 to 5 years? And that's what we need. We need to feel the burden of not being digitally connected soon enough, faster enough. And I think if we all keep that kind of an paradigm in us and willing to change quickly, I think that 3 to 5 years will be much sooner.
Great.
Because the business, the economy, the market, the customers will not give you the time. As Wim was saying, that he is waiting for 8 months. I don't think in future he would wait, not at all.
Yeah.
So either you are there or you are not there. You don't have a choice. So yes, 3 to 5 years they have clicked. If you would have given 1 to 2 years or 10 years, I'm sure they would have clicked 1 to 2 years.
Yeah. And 3 to 5 years, Michel, do you think that's possible? Or you think
I think it's possible, but I think maybe I should have said that at the beginning. It's a life or death question. It's not. We are not talking to about a nice to have. It's a must have, and it's a must have as soon as possible. So I think I see people are starting to go in this direction. I think everything is here to go fast. It will, and I'm sure some players are going to go fast. Some players are going to do it in 1 to 2 years. I'm sure of that. Now, and these one are going to be the winners. I'm convinced of that. So, and of course, you can imagine and I'm sure Amlan and Wim are going to do all their best efforts, and I will do the same to accelerate that.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great note to end the session on. Thank you very much. Of course, you're all still required in my world, so we can't have self-orchestrating conferences. I don't think that really works. Having robots talking to us, it wouldn't be as exciting or as pleasant. But yeah, let's look forward to see what the future holds for sure.
Maybe robots talking one to the other.
Maybe there has been tests of that already, right? So
well, I was expecting you at least would be open to a digital twin of Neemish Ladwa. So
I think maybe one of me is fine for now. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a real pleasure. We have the next session starting in 20 minutes, where we'll have a discussion about continue the discussion on supply chain 4.0. But it's been a great pleasure, and thank you very much. And look forward to discussing this more with you as further down the line.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Pleasure, likewise.